will be useful for you if we start talking about practicals. Because according to MCA guidelines, no MBBS student should be promoted without conducting the exam. So whether you come to the college or not, whether this lockdown period finishes or not, but if the examination is has to be conducted in the month of February, it has to be conducted. So we have to create the virtual cases. So I will start training you how to examine an ophthalmic case because very few of you had postings, and after that the lockdown has started. And I request you to follow this and practice it on your own relatives like grandfather, grandmother, or elderly parents in the world. So you can try to see the things in findings in your own surroundings, your maid servant or your driver, anyone is something you can start taking histories and start examining the case yourself. So, how to examine an ophthalmology case? Whenever you are posted in ophthalmology, we used to take this in detail for every batch of 25. But now I am going to talk to you about what are the complaint by which the patient will come to an ophthalmologist. The most common complaint by which the patient will come to an ophthalmologist is diminution of vision or decreased vision. The second is pain in eye, redness in eye, discharge from the eye, diplopia. Diplopia means one of ptosis, drooping of the upper eyelid, squint, and proptosis. Proptosis is protrusion of the eyeball. So any of this complaint will bring the patient to ophthalmic OP or to the ophthalmologist. So like in any other clinical posting, you have to take the history and you have to elaborate the complaints, leading complaint of the patient in the history of present illness. So whenever patient complains of diminution of the vision, you should go into the detail of the diminution of the vision, how diminution started, whether it is sudden or gradual. So there are causes which causes sudden pain, loss of vision or gradual loss of vision will be there. And then loss of vision, whether it is progressing or stationary, whether it is associated with pain or it is painless, whether it is associated with colored halos around the bulb, either there is you have to take the details of the drug history of the patient and then personal history. So one by one, we'll take the diminution of vision first. So whenever patient complains of diminution of the vision, you are supposed to see whether it is or ask the patient whether the diminution was sudden in onset or gradual in onset. The sudden diminution of the vision occurs in CRAO, central retinal artery occlusion, sudden bout of vitreous hemorrhage, retinal detachment involving macula, then the sudden loss of vision will be there. Gradual loss of vision will occur typically in cataract and glaucoma. And in cataract, the diminution of the vision will progress. As you all know, the theory has finished. The senile cataract has got 6 stages. Stage of lamellar separation, stage of incipient cataract, stage of intumescent cataract, stage of immature cataract, stage of mature cataract, and then stage of hypermature cataract. So the lens will go through all these stages slowly in patient to patient. So the diminution of vision will be progressive in nature. As the opacity in the lens advances, the patient will complain of progression of the loss of vision. Then you have to ask whether the loss of vision is associated with pain or painless. So typical painless loss of vision again occurs in cataract, and primary open-angle glaucoma. The loss of vision will be painless. The other cause, and it is gradual in nature. So sudden painless loss of vision is loss of vision will occur in CRAO, central retinal artery occlusion, central venous retinal venous occlusion, and sudden bout of vitreous hemorrhage. It will be painless and sudden, whereas gradual loss of vision will occur in cataract and primary open-angle glaucoma. And the vision is always, loss of vision is always painless in cataract and glaucoma. So if the patient complains of loss of vision associated with pain, then you have to ask whether it is localized pain or generalized pain or referred pain or headache and asthenopia. So it is a universal complaint. Headache is a universal complaint of the patient. So the cause could be as simple as a tight head to intracranial space occupying tumor, a serious condition. So you have to ascertain whether the pain is, loss of vision is associated with pain. So if it occurs along with the pain, you should ask whether it is localized to the one eye or it is generalized to the whole body, whether there is a referred pain. So next complaint is redness. Normally the eye is white. There won't be any redness or congestion. So if patient complains of redness, so again you have to ascertain whether it is unilateral redness or bilateral. Unilateral redness will occur in the causes because of local causes to that particular eye only. Bilateral redness will occur in contagious conjunctivitis. Whenever there is a epidemic of conjunctivitis in the city, the patient will be coming with bilateral redness of the eye. If the redness is unilateral, is limited to one eye, the causes could be foreign body in the eye or ulcer cornea in the eye. Then you have to ascertain whether it is diffuse redness or localized redness. As you can see in the pictures here, above picture shows a diffuse redness. The redness is diffuse throughout the bulbar conjunctiva. Whereas in lower picture, the redness or congestion is limited to the palpebral conjunctiva of the lower lid. So you have to ascertain when the patient complains of redness, whether it is unilateral redness involving one eye or bilateral redness. So there are different causes. As and when I discuss about the different causes, I will tell you what are the causes of bilateral redness and what are the causes of unilateral redness, what are the causes of diffuse redness, what are the causes of localized redness. Okay. So here in this picture, you can see the above picture shows a diffuse redness. How a diffuse redness looks like, we will see. And localized redness to the palpebral conjunctiva of the lower lid, you can see in the lower picture. Then the next complaint which patient commonly come to the ophthalmic OP is discharge from the eye. Whenever patient complains that he is having watering from the eye, you should ascertain whether it is excessive lacrimation or overflow of the tears or pathological discharge. So whenever something falls into the eye, so reflex lacrimation will occur, whether it is small foreign body or a irritant like a chili powder or when you cut the onions. So there will be watering from the eyes. It is reflex lacrimation. It is a protective phenomena to wash away the offending irritant from the eye. So watering or excessive lacrimation is known as epiphora. Epiphora, the causes could be excessive lacrimation because of reflex caused by the irritant which has fallen into the eye. It could be an onion juice or it could be a chili flake or it could be any foreign body. or it could be because of obstruction to the drainage of the lacrimal system. So if the watering which patient complains is watery in nature and it looks like a normal tears, so you have to ascertain whether it is excessive lacrimation because of some irritant which has fallen into the eye, or whether there is any obstruction to the eye, obstruction to the lacrimal flow. Again, you have to ascertain whether it is unilateral or bilateral. Again, as I told you, unilateral lacrimation is because of irritant fallen into that particular eye. Bilateral, always it will be a epidemic conjunctivitis, catarrhal conjunctivitis. Patient will have bilateral redness and patient will have bilateral watering and discharge from the eye. And as I told you, I have to ascertain whether it is a watery discharge because of excessive lacrimation or pathological discharge, mucopurulent discharge or purulent discharge. So you can see the above picture, it is a mucopurulent discharge, whereas below picture you can see the frank greenish yellow pus coming out from the lower fornix and into the caruncle or medial canthus. Diplopia. Diplopia is a phenomena in which patient will see one object as two. So it could be uniocular diplopia or binocular diplopia. When patient, all of you know, God has given us two eyes. And while taking the refraction and starting chapters of the theory, the doctor might have talked to you about binocular single vision. BSV is the phenomena which is given to higher primates and human being. So God has given us two eyes, and when you close one eye and see it an object of interest, you will see image as one. When you close that eye and see with the right eye, again the object of interest will appear as one. And you keep the both eyes open and still see the object of interest, the object will appear as one. This happens because the image of the object of interest will fall on the fovea simultaneously on the two fovea or macula. And the message from there will be carried to the brain, and at the cortical level the two images will fuse and we see one object as one, even though we are seeing the object with two eyes and two retina are being stimulated by the same object. So when the for binocular single vision, the prerequisite is the image should fall simultaneously on the fovea. The image will fall simultaneously on the fovea when both foveas are simultaneously stimulated. So this occurs when there is alignment of the eye is there. If there is squint, paralytic squint, so one eye will be deviated out or in. So in that particular eye, the image will not fall on fovea. As you all know, 90% of the vision will occur at the level of macula, and sharpness of the image will occur at macula. The image which falls on macula will be sharper and clearer, whereas image of the object which falls on peripheral retina will be blurred because peripheral retina is not so sensitive. So when these two images goes to the cortex will refuse to fuse these two images, dissimilar images. So patient will start seeing one object as two. This is known as binocular diplopia. So binocular diplopia will vanishes when patient close one of the eye, whether the affected eye or non-affected eye. If you close one eye of the patient, the diplopia will vanish. If it is uniocular diplopia, the diplopia will vanish only when you close the affected eye. If you close the normal eye, the diplopia still persists. So the cause of uniocular diplopia is subluxation of the lens. Normally, the lens should remain in the patellar fossa, and light enters into the eye through pupil and get refracted by the lens and cornea. First, it gets refracted by the cornea, and then light rays pass through the lens after entering into the pupil and get further refracted, and image will fall onto the fovea or macula. So if there is subluxation, the pupil will have two zones. One is phakic and another is aphakic. The light rays will enter into the eye through pupil. So the light rays which passes through the lens will get perfectly refracted and image will fall onto the fovea. The light rays which passes through the aphakic zone of the pupil will not get refracted by the lens. Only they get refracted by the cornea. So the blur image will occur in peripheral retina. Again, because two dissimilar images are falling, one is falling on the fovea and another is falling in peripheral retina, the patient will perceive diplopia. Here it is because of subluxation of the lens, it is known as uniocular diplopia. The next complaint by which the patient will come to the ophthalmic OP is drooping of upper eyelid. It is known as ptosis. So the picture on the above shows left eye is ptotic. The left upper eyelid is drooping. So the normal position of the upper eyelid is it should cover 2 millimeters of cornea. If it covers more than 2 millimeters of the cornea, it is known as ptosis. So again, you have to ascertain whether ptosis is since birth or acquired recently. Why it is important? A ptosis which is congenital is a stationary ptosis. It will not progress, it will not regress. It will remain stationary. So you can plan for surgery immediately in congenital ptosis. Whatever surgery, when I talk to you about ptosis surgery, there are three types of surgeries will be there. One is fascicular surveyant, other is LPS resection, and third is frontalis sling. So any of the surgery, depending upon the action of the LPS, you can do immediately in congenital ptosis, whereas acquired ptosis is it can progress, it can regress. So you should not take up acquired ptosis for surgery immediately. You should call patient every month and take the measurements. If the measurements are stationary for 3 months, then you can plan surgery. Otherwise, it will end up in overcorrection or undercorrection. So you should ascertain when a patient with the ptosis comes to you, you should ascertain whether it is since birth or recently acquired. Sometimes the patient will not be able to tell, or patient attendant will not be able to tell. Then you can ask the patient to bring the old photographs. This looking into the old photographs of the patient is known as FAT scan, FAT scan, family album tour. So you should ask the patient to bring what all previous photographs of the patient is there, first birthday, second birthday, or your cradle ceremony photos. You can ask them to bring all photos, and then you can, seeing the photos, you can ascertain whether the patient had ptosis since birth or it is recently acquired. So this is known as FAT scan or family album tour. And ptosis can be unilateral and bilateral. As you can see in the picture above, it is left eye, upper eyelid ptosis, whereas the picture below shows bilateral ptosis. Both upper eyelids are drooping. So if it is acquired ptosis, no, it is not since birth, then you have to ascertain whether it is followed by trauma, it is followed by fever, because certain fevers like viral fevers like measles and diphtheria can cause extraocular muscle paralysis leading to ptosis and LPS paralysis. So as I told you, since whether it is since birth, again squint. When patient both eyes are not aligned, normally the both eyes of the patient, when you throw the light from 33 centimeters on the face of the patient and ask the patient to look into the torchlight, the reflex of the torchlight should fall into the center of the pupil of both eyes. If it is falling in center of the pupil of both eyes, then the patient is said to be having well-aligned eyes or orthophoria, no squint. Here in this picture, you can see when I am throwing the light onto the face of the patient, in right eye, the reflection of the torch is falling into the center of the pupil, whereas in left eye, it is falling at the limbus, temporal limbus of the patient. Limbus is the junction of the cornea with sclera. Are you able to see that? The reflection from the torch in the right eye is falling into the center of the pupil, whereas in the left eye it is falling at the limbus, temporal limbus. So approximately this child is having 45 degrees of deviation. What type of deviation it is? Convergent squint. The eye is moved towards the nose. It is known as convergent squint. Okay. Again, you have to ask whether it is since birth or acquired. As I told you, if it is since birth, the causes are different. If it is acquired, the causes usually it is muscle paralysis, extraocular muscle paralysis. And the other cause of squint is thyroid associated eye disease. So while taking the proptosis, I talked to you about deposition of glycosaminoglycans into the extraocular muscles, leading to fibrosis of the muscle and which lead to restrictive myopathy or diplopia. Patient will see one object as two, and patient will not be able to move the eye in that particular direction. Then the next complaint by which the patient will be coming to an ophthalmologist is proptosis. Proptosis is protrusion of eyeball. Protrusion of eyeball is known as proptosis. Again, while taking the class on orbit, I talked to you in detail about what is proptosis, what are the causes of unilateral proptosis, and what are the causes of bilateral proptosis. So whenever patient gives the history of proptosis, you should ascertain whether it is unilateral proptosis or bilateral proptosis. The most common cause of bilateral proptosis is exophthalmos or thyroid eye disease. Then, whenever patient complains of proptosis, we should ascertain whether it is associated with diminution of vision or loss of vision. So, there are certain causes in which diminution of vision will occur first, and then proptosis will get exhibited later on. Like in optic nerve glioma, when optic nerve is involved, a small glioma involving the optic nerve, the patient will have fall of vision first. And when the glioma start growing, the patient will have axial proptosis later on. So it is very important to know whether the proptosis is associated with fall of vision. And when fall of vision occurs, whether it occurred before proptosis or after proptosis. If it occurs before proptosis, the most common cause is optic nerve glioma. The fall of vision occurring after proptosis. So first, the patient will develop proptosis and then there is fall of vision. The most common cause is meningioma. So proptosis will occur, and when pressure from the meningeal tumor exerts pressure on the optic nerve, then only the patient will experience loss of vision or diminution of vision. Then you should ask the patient of proptosis whether it is associated with pain or not. So again, yes, so pain, when it's whether proptosis started first and then recently he had pain, the causes are different. Whether from the beginning the patient has pain and proptosis together, the causes are different. Again, I talked to this in detail. So the causes of pain and proptosis occurring together, the most common cause is orbital cellulitis, cavernous sinus thrombosis. In these two conditions, the protrusion of the eyeball will occur and it is associated with pain. Whereas in lacrimal gland tumor, Proptosis, eccentric proptosis will occur. The globe will be pushed down and out. Once the pleomorphic adenoma gets converted into pleomorphic adenocarcinoma, when it infiltrates the periosteum of the bone, orbital bone, then the pain will start. So proptosis will occur first and pain will occur later on, or pain will be of recent origin. So you have to go into the details in the history whenever patient complains of proptosis, whether it is unilateral, bilateral, whether it is diminution of the vision is associated with it. If it is there, then you have to ascertain whether diminution of vision occurs first and then proptosis appeared, or proptosis appeared first and then diminution of vision, or both simultaneously, diminution of vision, pain, and proptosis occurring together. It occurs in cavernous sinus thrombosis and orbital cellulitis. Then there are certain causes of proptosis which will be pulsatile in nature. With, as I told you while discussing about the proptosis, one of the cause of proptosis is keratico-cavernous fistula. As you all know, the carotid artery, internal carotid artery, will pass through the substance of cavernous sinus. In old patient, when atherosclerosis occur, when they had trivial trauma in the bathroom, when they have a head injury, trivial injury, then the carotid artery, any of the branch will give way and arterial blood will enter into cavernous sinus, which is venous in nature. So whenever arterial blood enters into venous sinus, there will be backflow will be there, and with every pulsation of the artery, the eyeball will protrude out and goes back into the orbit. So it is one of the cause of pulsatile proptosis is keratico-cavernous fistula. Then, after this has completed the history taking, after history taking, history of present illness is over. So the next thing is history of past illness. History of past illness is very important in ophthalmology because God has given, well, simple thing is God has given two eyes to the patient. Okay, and every one of us have got two eyes. So if a patient comes with the cataract surgery and underwent cataract surgery in one eye, then he again comes back to you for the second eye cataract surgery. So the past history, he will give you that 4 years back, I had diminution of vision in the right eye. I underwent cataract surgery and IOL was implanted and post-operative period was good and there was no pain and it was uneventful and I have got good vision. I am satisfied because I had come for the surgery of the other eye. So this is very important. Whenever patient comes back to you for the second eye surgery, either he is a satisfied patient or sometimes he undergoes surgery elsewhere and he had some turbulent post-op period and he has come to you for the second eye surgery. Then you should go into the detail why, what happened during that eye surgery, why it was turbulent. You check the records and ask the patient whether immediately after the surgery did had pain or diminution of the vision, and then after treating the vision regained, or he didn't regain the vision properly to his satisfaction. All these things you should take in the past history, and if you don't take the past history properly, then what the previous surgeon, so you should learn from the mistakes done by others because we will not live long enough to make all the mistakes. So if you don't learn from the mistakes of the others, then the same things can occur in this eye also, and patient will be unsatisfied patient. If the patient has got turbulent post-op period, what's the reason? Whether he is having any chronic uveitis in the eye that has reacted after cataract surgery or got exacerbated. So you can take precautions to prevent those complications by treating the patient beforehand and anticipating the complications. That is the importance of past history. The another importance of the past history is there are certain diseases in ophthalmology which will have remissions and exacerbations, or there are certain diseases which are seasonal in nature. So the disease which will have remissions and exacerbation is uveitis, acute iridocyclitis. Patient will have acute symptoms, he will have some sequelae of that disease, and then eye will become quiet. And all of a sudden, after 3 months or 6 months, again he will come back with the same complaints in the same eye, and you can see the acute exacerbation of the chronic iridocyclitis. Or certain seasonal disease like vernal keratoconjunctivitis. So it occurs in during summer season when the patients are more exposed to certain types of pollen or ultraviolet rays. The patient, mostly the children, will have redness of the eye and they will be rubbing the eyes. And if you avert the upper lid, you will see the big papillae, allergic papillae onto the tarsal conjunctiva. So the importance of past history is there are certain diseases. The God has given two eyes. That is the important. Second is there are certain diseases in ophthalmology which have exacerbation and remissions, and there are certain seasonal disease like vernal keratoconjunctivitis, which occurs during that season. The patient himself will tell every summer my child's eye will become red when he goes out during summer holidays for playing cricket or outdoor games. So you can have the clue that this particular case is having vernal keratoconjunctivitis, and you can treat accordingly. After past history, you will have personal history. Previously, when I was student like you, my professor used to give lot of importance to personal history, whether the patient is having any constipation or prostate. Most of our cataract patients will be 70 plus, and they will be having enlarged prostate and difficulty in initiation of the urine. So they have to exert more pressure in the abdomen, and this increased intra-abdominal pressure will be transmitted to intraocular pressure, and patient will have problems during the postoperative period. Nowadays, we are doing cataract surgery without suture and from very small incision. So even patient have constipation, we are not bothered. The moment even during surgery, the patient is, has any increase of intra-abdominal pressure like cough. So just remove the instrument from the eye, the self-sealing wound will seal and patient will not have any complication. Previous days we used to take a very big incisions like 11 millimeter incision, and when the eye is open, if patient coughs, then the whole contents of the globe will come out. So that was the danger. That's why my professor, when I was student like you, used to be very particular about whether the patient is having any cough or asthma or constipation. If the patient has constipation during post-op period, if they exert the stool or while passing the urine, then the increased abdominal pressure will be transmitted to the intraocular pressure, and patient may have bleeding in the eye, hyphema, or prolapse of the iris can occur. So all these things have we are not bothered nowadays because we are doing cataract surgery from very small incision. Okay. Still, the drug history is very important. So you should know what drugs the patient is taking. Like if the patient is having hypothyroid, if he is on thyroxine replacement, then so their myocardium, whether they are hypothyroid or hyperthyroid, the myocardium of the thyroid patient is sensitized to internal adrenaline, norepinephrine, and adrenaline. So, as you all know, while taking the lens class, the doctor might have talked to you about the block. The block which we give is 2% xylocaine, Hyles, and adrenaline mixture. So we'll be adding adrenaline 1 ampule to 30 ml of the 2% xylocaine. So if you give adrenaline to the patient of thyroid, hypothyroid or hyperthyroid, they may develop myocardium infarction on the table. So that's the importance of taking drug history. So you should take the drug history of the patient, whether he is on any drug. If he is on thyroid, thyroid replacement therapy or neomarcazole, you should try to avoid giving adrenaline to such patients. We should give block without adrenaline in so that types of patient. If the patient is hypertensive, then you should instruct the patient to take the morning dose of the antihypertensive and then proceed with the surgery. Patient should not miss the morning dose, as we are not doing cataract surgery under general anesthesia. So there is no nothing by mouth or instruction for our patients. So patient can take morning dose of antihypertensive drugs or diabetic drugs. If he is on insulin, you can take insulin and you can have light diet also on the day of operation. So this is the importance of knowing whether the patient is on any drugs. Okay. And family history and as other conditions in other specialties, whether it is much important or not, but here there are certain diseases in ophthalmology which runs in family, like congenital cataract. Cataract usually occurs in old age. It is known as senile cataract. Sometimes the cataract will occur in small children. It is known as developmental cataract, or newborn also can have cataract because of insult while development of the lens. If some insult occurs, viral infection occurs to the mother, so the child may develop cataract. And there are certain inborn error of metabolism which causes cataract. So it runs in families. So if one sibling has got congenital cataract or developmental cataract, the other siblings will also have the same complaint. So that is the importance of family history. Open angle glaucoma runs in family. Refractive errors runs in family. And then your oculocutaneous albinism also runs in family. And there are certain trisomy 21. So it causes, there are ocular manifestations are more in Down syndrome. So family history is also important in ophthalmology. So I'll stop here because this finishes the history taking. So now you know how to take the history in ophthalmology. You start doing it on your grandfather or grandmother or your elderly parents or driver or your maid servant, because we don't know when you are going to come back to the college and see the patients. And if the examination occurs as per schedule in the month of February, so you should not lag behind. So certain efforts you should make on from your side. So I will be trying to give you the case scenarios, how to examine how to take the history I had taken today. Tomorrow I will be taking what is the importance of general examination in the ophthalmology and local examination of the eye, how it has to be done. I will take tomorrow. Okay, and then I will subsequent classes I will take case scenarios like how an immature cataract look like, what are the findings you are supposed to see in the immature cataract, and what are the findings you are supposed to see in mature cataract, and what are the findings you are supposed to see in hypermature cataract, what are the findings you are supposed to see in aphakic patient, what are the findings you are supposed to see in pseudophakic patient, then ulcer cornea, whether it is a bacterial ulcer cornea, how it looks like, and fungal ulcer cornea, how it looks like, what is the differentiating point, and then what is the viral keratitis. So what are the cases which will be kept in the exam? I will try to simulate and give you the findings and show the photographs. You also visit the YouTube or your Wikipedia and your textbooks also, and try to jot down the points which will be asked in the practical. I will be emphasizing in my lecture what are the points which will be asked by examiners when you face the final exam. Okay. So I closes the class today. Tomorrow I will be talking to you about general examination and local examination of the eye. And after listening to this lecture, you start doing normal examination of normal person. You will have a certain nephew, niece, or your grandfather or grandmother or your elderly parent. You take a torchlight and start examining step by step, and try to write the case sheet on yourself, on your grandmother or grandfather. So that will give you the practice. So because you don't know how the things will go on and how the things will be when you are going to come or you are directly come for the examination. as our postgraduates did it.